All right, thank you very much, Victor, for that very exciting poll session. And thank you to all who participated. So, right now, we'll be heading straight into the panel session where we have Peace as the moderator. And I'll be introducing one of our speakers today. So, we have Ignasi, who is the Chief Technology Officer at Refinity, and Ignasi is a leader in technology development and commercialization with over 25 years of experience in process development and scale up and technology economic and sustainable assessment of new technologies in the chemicals and falls industries. Prior to joining Refinity as CTO in 2025, Ignasi was the executive director and CTO of the Rapid Manufacturing Institute, where he led the institute's successful funding renewal with a new focus on process technologies for sustainability and circularity in the process industries. Ignasi also teaches at the Illinois Institute of Technology in Chicago as an adjunct professor. He has a PhD in chemical engineering from the University of Wisconsin, Madison, and an engineer's degree from the Università Polytechnic de Catalonia. Ignacio, you have to help me on this one, right? Um, Barcelona Tech, and Ignacio is a fellow of the American Institute of Chemical Engineers. So I will pass the mic to Peace right now, but it's super, super exciting to have you on board, Ignacio. Over to you, Peace.
Yeah, I mean, Ignasi will be going now. Thank you, Ignasi, for joining us. I met Ignasi last year in San Diego, and really amazing person. While in university, I took a lot of rapid courses, and I'm very sure Ignasi was one of those who must have prepared some of those materials I encountered. And yeah, since that time, Ignasi has actually been a very, very good source of motivation to me. And yeah, we are so happy to have you here today join us. And before the panel session, Ignasi will have some presentation on the digital energy landscape in North America. Right. So, Ignasi, you have the floor. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you. Thank you for the invitation. Thank you for the kind presentations, both of you. Appreciate it. So I will share a few slides that put together. Here we go. All right. So hopefully you can see my title slide now. Yep, looks like it.
Yes.
It's going to be a handful, and literally a handful, because there's, I think, 5 slides, just presenting some of the ideas or some thoughts around digital energy, especially a bit of a biased view from North America, and more specifically from the U.S., where I am. I have to say that, and I wanted to make sure that all that I'm going to present are my own personal or professional personal opinions, and should not be taking to reflect any or either of my employers or any others. So this is purely my own considerations. So to start, anybody that follows the news, is particularly about the U.S., see that this year, particularly following the late 2024 year election, there is a quite a changing perspective and quite a lot of changes in energy policy and energy perspective from the U.S. particularly, and because of the economic and political part of the U.S. affecting the rest of the world. So I think it's important to recognize and to see that, but also not to overreact, and try to understand really where the changes are, where some of the things that remain similar, and to the extent, right? So I put some thoughts together on kind of the change of this changing perspective, because we still don't have very good ideas about the current administration, a full picture of what the current administration does. So I would say the previous administration, Biden administration, the focus largely was on decarbonization as a big idea, and they had put a lot of material out, and there was a strategy based on that. I put some dates here. Every country, every region has dates. The previous Biden administration was seeing 2035 as a key date for electrical grid decarbonization, leading to a 2050 industrial decarbonization. Those, it's important to see that those were target dates and not really hardcore commitments. There is a degree of skepticism, particularly at 2035, given how long it takes for any of those commitments to become realities, right? Is it realistically to expect big 2035 changes if we are not seeing the investment on the ground right now? Questions. What we know, what was clear, there was a directional strategy with some intermediate points and a very clear commitment to decarbonization. That is lowering carbon GHG emissions of the core sources: energy production, energy generation, industrial use, and industrial generation of emissions. This perspective or this idea, and this was largely done through the Department of Energy, gave rise to a number of very high-level programs or very targeted but long-range targeted under the generic label of Earthshots. And for those of you that have seen, why do they use that? It was mimicking the old moonshot. Moonshot is what the U.S. did back in the 60s under President Kennedy about going to the moon, and that was the moonshot. So trying to think about it in that way, finding these a long-range focusing objectives, but it's about the Earth, it's about climate change, it's about and moonshots is where that was, and there were a number of them. I put a few here, and sorry for the repeating. There was a big one on hydrogen that still there, and we'll see what happens. Electrification and use of renewables was a big one. And you can probably, you cannot see what's there anymore. You probably can do and find some of the old by this point reports. But I want to emphasize that these shots or these very long range ideas were both in energy generation and energy use. And I'll tie in the digital part a bit in a little bit. What I would say is that in general, the previous administration, the Biden administration, had a very expansive, but not necessarily fully internally coherent strategy on the energy and energy transition. Okay, so wanting to do a lot of things, but with not a very, in my view, again, very well-defined connection between the different Earth shots and how does these interact the other and that type of stuff, right? It was a very hopeful, very forward-looking. Compare that to the current administration, the Trump administration. Obviously, this is sometimes it's hard to realize that it's only been a few months and everything's changed, but in unclear ways yet. What is pretty clear is that the focus is not on decarbonization, is on energy expansion. So the focus is on more energy rather than, I would say, decarbonized energy. So it's a different focus. It's not a not do anything, but it's a different focus. Using some of the language of the current administration, if you see some of the press releases, they talk about unleashing American energy. So it's very American focused, America first, and that kind of stuff. But there is a world component is reflecting, and you see Secretary Wright always brings up the world energy demand is increasing, so we cannot afford not growing the energy production, the energy generation. So there's something there. For those of us concerned on sustainability, we have to admit that, yes, we have to be very careful and not increase emissions and to be careful, but that there is a demand of energy. And if we don't address it, that demand will be filled or will be fulfilled, but not necessarily very good ways. So important to realize that there are some points in there. There's, I would say, a still in development, not very clear strategic focus. there is some points that we are seeing some clear focus. I say the nuclear, the renewed focus on nuclear, which by the way started very much in the Biden administration and is very expansive now in the current administration, is very clear, and I think that has some real tight connections to digital energy and digital energy, and I'll elaborate on those a little bit. There is a renewed push, and I'm not sure if it's a real rather or a headline or a political push back for fossil, whether it be renewed fracking. The coal, I think, is just an unrealistic one. But clearly on LNG, liquefied natural gas, and expanding natural gas export for the U.S., it's clearly there. What's happening in renewables? It's very hard to know. Renewables, and particularly the more mature sources of renewables, solar, wind, are still there, and even with a potentially lowering the support, the federal support for those are entrenched enough, and they're really the lowest cost generation of electricity right now in the U.S. So they're not going anywhere. They're transitioning to very much the commercial. But what is happening to the hydrogen initiatives? What's happening to the focus on electrification? TBD. Nobody really knows. I don't think even the folks in the administration really know yet. So I would say patient look and see what happens. My next look is on the digital energy, right? I mean, that was more that the energy landscape at a very high level, a strategy, industrial strategy and politics. So when I look at digital energy, and I like to frame things from the high level and then see what the consequences at the pragmatic level are, I see both challenges and opportunities. So I'm going to start with the challenges. I'm going to end with the opportunities. So digital energy, to me, there's challenges in the way that all the digital initiatives bring with them a large increase in energy demand for the assets needed for this digital transformation. Data centers is the main one that we always hear. Data centers, but also AI. Obviously, the energy consumption is very large and clear how we're going to address, right? So there's a challenge here. There's also a challenge not just with the amount of energy, but the further imbalance between the demand of that energy and the generation capacity. So when is that energy demand and when is that energy generated? Sometimes, we talk about the duck curve, in which the timeliness of the generation and demand changes. But I would say with the large digital assets, it becomes less, the time dependency is less clear. So that repeatability of the duck curve that, morning, night, midday is relatively predictable becomes less so. So it puts a further stress. It's not just amount, it's when that amount happens and how quickly that changes. And I would say there is a further challenge for me, which is something that I've been thinking for years, which a detangling between data, information, and knowledge, right? So digital creates a lot of data, creates a lot of knowledge. It's easier to put more sensors and to collect more points out of the sensors, but how do we create knowledge out of it? And that's something that is not so clear. I see a lot of the AI trying to do that, trying to create knowledge, but is it really knowledge, or is it just some high-level inferences from the data without assuming quality or understanding the context of the data well enough? So that's a challenge, right? What are the opportunities? Well, there's some of the opportunities, and I think that's very related to the work that Chemotronix and you guys are doing, which is finding some of these, the ability to come up with new operational frameworks, distributed, autonomous, combining things that otherwise, without the digital backbone, would have been very difficult to work in a coherent operational way. In the U.S., the Department of Energy has talked quite a bit about virtual power plants, which sounds a bit funny, but it really is the operating distributed power generation assets as a coherent power plant, but it's a virtual one, right? There is a bit of solar here, a bit of wind there, even a household generated, but doing it in a virtual, coherent way. So I think that's very important. There is also, and you guys talk a lot about this as well, using this digital backbone and digital tools as a real-time tracking, I would even dare say control of these distributed capacity, both for operations, which is the traditional realm of control and real-time tracking, but also on the business realm, right? It's not just being able to track and control that things are going well and that nothing goes, but also being able to, in real time, create business transactions, create buying and selling operations, setting costs and transactional prices in real time. And that's a real opportunity because it allows us to bring in both technical control and also a commercial ability to deal with this time imbalance that we saw before between generation and demand. And what I would say later, and I think that's an important point as well, is that this connects very much with initiatives around digital manufacturing, and particularly around the ability in some organisms that are doing that, in some organizations that are helping in the democratization of this digital manufacturing. By that, I mean the ability of small small manufacturing enterprises, the small companies worldwide to access the capability of digital manufacturing. So, for example, in the US, we have another institute, one of the sibling institutes to the Rapid Institute that I was leading, called MXD, that deals with digital manufacturing. They have a big focus on small and medium enterprises having access to digital manufacturing techniques and capabilities. And I think that's very much something that can be extended worldwide. That digital allows a lot more people to access capabilities than otherwise would be restricted to large companies, presumably only in highly developed spaces. If we move to now what we were talking, or we can talk about energy transition, and what is energy transition, what is decarbonization, what is net zero. To me, those are different labels, and I've been talking about that point for a number of years. And I prefer not to be too hang up on the different labels. So these different labels are largely, I would say, politically influenced. They have slightly different meaning, but it all means moving towards a decarbonization and addressing of the causes of global warming in different ways. If by using a label we don't like as well, we do better things, I'm all for it. It really is about doing good things. It's not so much about fighting over what label we're going to use. That pragmatism, I think, is quite important. Another reflection, and I bet before that in the US particularly, the federal support for a lot of energy transition or decarbonization efforts is largely suspended, is the word that I put in. I don't think it's reasonable to say cancel, because things come and go and administrations come and go as well. So it's paused, it's suspended. But you have to understand that particularly in a system like in the US, states, and in this case, particularly some states, you've seen California doing very different things that the federal government is doing in industry. And industry has been largely, and is largely still very much standing behind their commitments to the energy transition, to the net zero, and the strong support. Are there enough dollars behind their strong words? Never, right? They always need to put more. We always want more to do it. But it's important to see that there is not one level of support, that there is a different levels. And I think there's going to be showing that some of the states, and particularly the more forward-looking, bigger states, California, New York, and even my own state of Illinois are putting a lot of money and effort behind their initiatives and industry. And I would say some of the bad industry, and I don't believe it's bad. It's very strongly. You see companies, even some companies like ExxonMobil that has been demonized time and time again. They're standing very strongly behind their decarbonization and net zero commitments. Now all the oil and gas companies largely are doing that. The chemicals. So I believe the industry is really keeping their commitments even in the current time. The way I see it is a bit of a pendulum swing, right? At some point, we can be seen as being obsessive about the energy transition. At some point, there is a bit of a push to ignore it, it'll go away, and we know that it's not realistic to either obsess, because obsession is not necessarily what helps us work, is a focus, to being more of a realistically addressing those problems and making it happen. Sometimes, don't be dismayed with the pendulum swings against the direction you feel more comfortable, but also don't be complacent when it's in the direction you want, and moderate and do that. And there's really a large role for digital in here. Again, operational enabling, I talked about that, tracking, which is to help us to enforce those commitments. Governments and companies have commitments, but we want to make sure that things done and with a commitment, done and with a headline, and become reality. And those digital tools is where we can use those to also track that those commitments are there. Let me, have some a couple of 30 seconds, 2 minutes on nuclear, since particularly from the U.S. there is this renewed focus on nuclear as as an energy generating panacea, if you will. What is good and what is bad about it? Obviously it's a reliable base load, energy base load, power base load, and it's a very large source of decarbonized energy. So something we know how to do, can be done at scale, or it needs to be done at scale, I would say, and it's decarbonized. But it's expensive, it's low to build, and it has low flexibility, right? So it's not all good, but there is a lot of good with it. I'm not going into the safety, into the security, into those aspects, because those are a bit of a break into jail type of issues. I think it's important to realize that there's also new approaches and a small modular reactors. So the downscaling, the scaling down of nuclear, it's important. The U.S. sees itself as the leader in it. Part of it is because we have all the experience of or a lot of experience in the military side of smaller nuclear reactors. At the end of the day, a nuclear submarine has a small nuclear reactor inside. So obviously different constraints of using those for civilian purposes. But the ability to do that and to create that technology is there. There is always the fusion, right? Fusion will be the future. There has been some real advances. Some of us are believers. The timeline, TBD. It's been the next, 20 years for the last 50 years. So we'll see what that happens. A very interesting thing on nuclear is the possibility and the developments in tightly connection to specific assets, particularly in our case, in our discussion, to digital assets, to data centers. So you've seen commitments, or you've seen initiatives from the likes of Microsoft and Amazon and Google about building some nuclear assets, whether it be small nuclear reactors or larger ones, connected to future digital assets. And that's a very interesting proposition, right? So it's about creating new data centers without affecting the current energy, and creating them with their own decarbonized capability. Realistic, we'll see. Very worth investigating. But I would say it doesn't stop at digital. There's also ideas and plans behind tying new nuclear developments, particularly small nuclear reactors, SMRs, to other industries. Dow Chemical has a very interesting initiative about doing that in one of their petrochemical assets in Texas, in which the vision is to have a small nuclear reactor, small modular reactor from X Energy as a decarbonized steam generator. So they're going forward. They're putting their money. They see that as an important point. So I'm going to end with a couple of thoughts, and those are both in the digital and in the physical assets. I think it's important to keep and increase that tight connection. Sometimes there is a tendency, and I would say that the folks on the digital, in my background, is on the software side as well. So I blame myself as much as others of moving the digital world and thoughts without thinking that we need to be connected and remain connected to the physical assets. To me, that's a bit of an expansion of the digital twin concept, right? That there has to be the data that there cannot be a digital without supporting the physical asset, because at the end of the day, energy is generated and it's consumed mostly through this physical asset. And by the way, a data center is a physical asset for a digital production. On data, it's not just data amount, it's quality, it's reliability, it's accessibility, it's transparency of the data. So the quality and all these other characteristics things and many other adjectives we could have here are part of that. It's also it's important to think of the digital in service of energy, both generation, use, efficiency. It's not its own purpose, it's in service of the other uses and generation of energy. And I think it's particularly important to be very pragmatic, right? And it is a very politicized world, and in the country that I live in, even more than others, but it's politicized everywhere. But pragmatism, we need to do good things with whatever environment we have to do. We have to have a very pragmatic generation. Doing better is always better than doing nothing, even if it's just a little bit better. So I'll end here. I want to thank all of you. Here's my email for anybody that wants to reach out and connect. As Peace knows, I like to talk. I like to connect with you guys. I like to connect with the new generation of energy and engineers, and to appreciate this to all of you.
Wow, that was awesome. Thank you, Ignasi. I mean, you said a whole lot. I have a number of questions, so I think I'll just keep my questions till the panel session. Radhika is here, but thank you, Radhika, for joining us. I'm very sure that also have questions in the chats, all right? So please drop your questions. We'll pick them up during the panel session. Thanks so much, Ignasi, for that session.